we've got sort of 10 minutes or so now to look at some sort of Q&A, questions and answers. But what I'm going to do before that is I'm just going to do a little summary. I've made some notes as I've gone along about some of the things we've just heard. You know, we've been talking now for about 25 minutes, and I think it's been an idea a minute, I would have thought, in terms of things that the device manufacturers and the supply chain can do to help the original equipment manufacturers and contract manufacturers get products to market faster. And the thing that always surprises me is the diversity of ideas. So I'm just going to run through a few of these, and hopefully as time goes by we can turn some of these into article concepts. We can come back to you guys and we can write some more about these sorts of subjects in the magazines. You know, Sean, you were talking about the fact that purchasing needs to be rolled into the design discussions, because the last thing you want to do is to design something that you can't make or you can't buy, because that's an obvious break point in that you know, in that chain. And not to forget that time to market is obviously an early discussion point. But when a product is in manufacture, and say, for example, an obsolescence issue comes up, such as yourself, it's actually going to stop that production process. So effectively, you know, you're kind of ruining that second half product cycle by breaking down that supply process. So, you know, what Sean's suggesting there is that where possible, to design with standard components so that those surprises won't emerge, while at the same time, I think differentiating your product using new technology, which is both easier to manufacture, and if it is bespoke, then quicker to bespoke in real time, rather than relying upon device technologies that take time to produce and ship. Other stuff, I think the, you know, automating in a cloud environment the relationship between design and purchasing. I think I can go a little bit beyond some of the stuff that you guys have been talking about here, because one of the trends from a lot of the exhibitors that we've been talking to over the past few days is finally the coming together of the design and purchasing process as a simultaneous and autonomous process. I'm guessing this is probably going to come as a bit of a shock to some design engineers, who have always been in a very fortunate position to be able to hand over that supply chain issue to someone else. It may come as a little bit of a shock, but very soon, e.g. kind of now, and I think this exhibition is a watershed in this, without even knowing it, the design processes and design tools they are using will be doing the kind of heavy lifting work in terms of the bill of materials, pricing and availability issues. And prior to this event and prior to seeing some of the work that these guys and others are doing, I've never really seen that before. So I think that's a real watershed, and some, you know, a new concept that both design engineers and purchasing professionals are going to have to get their heads round. I don't know who will quite be in charge, but they'll have to decide. Clearly, designers want to spend time designing the differentiation aspects, you know, as was mentioned, and so I guess again, to get those products to market quicker, it's the ability to automate those labour-intensive, low-value tasks that creep into this whole process and delay things. And that can be, you know, just like you say, the 3D modelling. You know, do you want to spend time 3D modelling a device to get it onto a PCB schematic, when the chances are someone may have already done that and you can just tap into that either at a modest cost or free of charge. And it was interesting about the information and the kind of the fact that the right information at the right time allows you to almost predict market demand at a much lower, a much earlier point in the production cycle, so that the distribution channels can actually start stocking and start bringing inventory in ahead of that demand becoming real, but with some confidence that within a month or a week or a day or whatever it is, that demand will actually materialize because all of the design input is suggesting it will. So some really sort of fascinating concepts there. What I'll do now, if we'll move into a few questions and answers, if that's all right. We've got about we've got 10 minutes or so. The first thing I would like to do is open up the questions to our visitors and delegates in the room. Is there anyone here who would like to pose a question or two to our panel? Hands up. Or is everybody too shy at the moment? Anyone out there? Okay. It's often this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start asking some questions myself, if that's all right with you guys. I think rolling on from that theme of, how can I put it, making both the design and purchasing function a kind of single autonomous step, who's going to be in charge? Is it going to be the design engineer adopting the purchasing function during that design process? Or are we going to see purchasing departments becoming more technical?
Is that working? No? Yeah?
Yeah.
So I think the answer probably it's not black or white. I think actually what is probably already happening today is that engineers will purchase prototype quantities because ultimately purchasing managers they earn their money by negotiating big deals, right? And trying to reduce the overall cost of their component needs. They add, I guess, little in terms of value to prototype quantities. So I suspect engineers will govern what prototype quantities are purchased, and that will be handed over then once the design is finalised to the purchasing manager. Yeah. Okay. So introducing kind of easy, seamless routes in design tools that enable quotation and purchase without that pesky sales guy knocking on their door is clearly going to deliver some value for the engineer who don't typically like purchasing, right?
So I'll speak on behalf of the pesky salespeople. The person that's in charge is ultimately you. The consumer is at the forefront of deciding what they want. The manufacturer responds to the consumer demand. So we all decide. Actually, the people that are deciding more and more is the new generation because they want it smaller, easier, faster, and they are the people that will decide what it is that we want, that we have to deliver ultimately. And it's all about speed of choice, information online. So we live in a technology now where actually our children know more about what's coming next than what we do at the touch of a button. So they are the deciders of the future. We have to respond to that demand.
I think from our perspective, I think dealing with high-tech emerging industries, I think both engineering and purchasing are on an equal footing.
Can you hold the mic closer?
The engineering department works closely with the purchasing department already. They tend to have a favoured vendor list, if for want of a better phrase. But I think purchasing departments are much more technical now than they've ever been before anyway. And I think they are much more aware of the capabilities of people in the market, and they are becoming more and more aware of how they can best utilise that. So I think it's happening now, and I think it's happening particularly in high technology emerging companies.
I think the engineers playing a huge role in this, really because of the plethora of information which is at his fingertips. And I think there's a huge change in distribution as to almost a polarizing effect of who does what. And what you're seeing out there is there's volume distributors and there's distributors who fit more into the design fulfillment part of the chain. And as I always say, volume distributors stock volume components, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's just that they're probably less likely, due to turns ratios they like to have within their business, they don't put all the newest parts on the shelf. So what you're finding from the design fulfillment distribution, people like ourselves, is that those newest parts are put on the shelf to help that engineer make the decision, And he's making decisions on lots of projects at the same time. So some of those ultimately go into production, but really with the information at his fingertips, he's able to make sure he takes out the end-of-life parts, takes out the not recommended for new design parts, by really utilising the web tools which we offer.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I'm going to be greedy and ask another question myself, if that's all right. How long have I been looking at time to market issues? At least 20 years, probably longer. And there was a period a decade or so ago where time to market as an issue kind of faded away because there was a concept emerging called mass customization. It was based on a theory that electronic product hardware wasn't the method to differentiate an electronic product. The solution was going to be in the software. And so we went through a period where OEMs were sort of engineering products based on a very standard hardware design, and that features and functions and performance and capability and future-proofing was going to be built into software and software alone. And yet, strangely enough, we're still here talking about methods to get products to production lines in ever more complex ways. Did that ever happen? Did it evaporate? Did it never happen? Because it was supposed to be the solution for time to market issues, and yet I don't think I ever saw it myself.
I think it has happened to an extent. I think, if I remember my own company as a design engineer, we were probably 9 hardware to 1 software guy. And I think that has changed over the last 15 years. I see software taking a bigger part of the design process. However, I think there's a recognition that the hardware, you need competent hardware for that development has to be synergistic.
Okay.
I think the open source kind of hardware movement is probably what's replacing this mass customization.
Okay.
So its ability to very quickly cut and paste kind of vanilla solutions, if you like, and then differentiate your product with software. So I think that is starting to gain momentum.
Okay.
But yeah, you're right, that original concept I don't think is quite here yet.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's interesting, the open source issue. Obviously, it's allowed the software industry itself to reduce its time to market because so many software products are simply cut and paste modules in an open source environment. So I'm aware of time. We're going to need to wrap up in a few minutes. Are there any questions on the shop floor, so to speak? One over there. Sorry, Scott. We'll pass you a microphone. If you could just introduce yourself and then your question, please.
My name's Paul Chaplin from Axis. We're a subcontractor in the UK, and the question I got for the panel is most of the customers I build for use you guys to design parts in, which is excellent. We'll buy prototype quantities from you to build first batch boards. We then go into the manufacturing phase, the production phase, and I'm faced with 12, 16, 18-week lead times from the broadline distributors, be the point you made, Mark. They don't want to stock it because it impacts their turns. So my question is, could you influence the manufacturers who you represent to try and reduce lead times on some of these parts? Because for me, that is the overriding factor that affects time to market.
Okay.
I should probably also add, your spend and your profile with those guys is far greater than mine is and mine will ever be. So you probably are seeing the downloads for data sheets, the requests for samples. So I'm hoping they could respond and reduce that lead time.
I think from the perspective of a manufacturer as opposed to a distributor, it's all down to working with the end manufacturer and to listen to what we have to say, to listen to the products that we see development on and growth on, so that the right sort of profiles are in place, and keeping those profiles fresh and working to keep those profiles fresh so that you guys have the right product in stock for the end customer.
Yeah, so Paul, I'm glad you've recognised the role that we three provide and the one guy that's missing from here. I think it all starts with all three of us, that's one thing we'll probably agree on this panel, we support a wide range of suppliers. And what we're doing is we are trying to bring you as many solutions as we can, both in the design process and then as it moves upstream to volume production. We deliberately do not want to play in the volume space. We want to support that. In fact, what this topic is about is the time to market. We want to give you as much flexibility, as many options as you need in that design phase, so you're not limited to one manufacturer. You have a range, and we support a range. As it moves upstream, there is always the challenge of whether the volume guys, and Mark referenced that, whether they have stock or they don't have stock. I think increasingly we are helping more and more companies in what is this mid-size volume demand. And when it reaches the large volumes, exactly what Sean's referred to is, if there's close collaboration, close understanding at the beginning of the design cycle, and you've designed from a standardized part range, then the availability of that product, whether it goes to the volume guys or whether it goes to the direct source, that's critical. If you're narrowing your design and you're just focused on one supplier, then obviously that's where the risk comes, or what my colleague on my right would be pulling a part from who knows where, and that is where you get into your 16, 20, 30-week lead time problems. So actually, the online availability and the range that we provide, I think, has significantly reduced the complexities that we probably faced together 15, 20, 25 years ago, because we're that old and that grey and without hair.
I think it's interesting you asked the question. I think certainly it's good that you point out the design fulfillment guys do offer something special. And we work very closely with the manufacturers and don't launch every product which they give us. So we look very much into working with their marketing and their product people and only launching products which we believe have a path which is going to get to market in a good time scale. Now, do we always get that right? Well, probably not, but that's certainly where we focus on, is to make sure that we're only launching the parts which are really going to help the design engineer, rather than when it goes into production is not available. Just because we're not involved in the production part of the chain doesn't mean we forget it. From a company standpoint, Mauser's part of TTI. So from our standpoint is when it goes into volume, it goes to our sister company. So there's no sense in us not getting the right part for them to move into production. So we play a role in it, but the manufacturers are their own beasts, and we can control them as an industry in some ways, and we work very closely with them. But there's always going to be an occasion where the volume guys are not stocking it quick enough. You probably want to ask some of the volume guys why they're not stocking it. I guess that's their problem.
That's well done. Right, looking at the time, I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up because we need a few minutes just to switch over to our next subject, which is supply chain security. And hopefully you guys can hang around to get involved in that subject as well. And I'll conclude by saying a massive thank you to our panel members here who've dipped into an awful lot of experience and knowledge. And I say brought forward at least 20 or 30 sort of concepts there that people can focus on in terms of how distribution and device manufacturers can help OEMs get to market faster. So thank you very much.